From Wondery, I'm Robert Moor, and this is a special episode of Over My Dead Body.
Tell me his name now, I'll put him 6 feet underground.
Back in 2019, I hosted season 2 of the podcast about a gay, gun-carrying zoo owner from Oklahoma named Joe Exotic.
Hey, I'm Joe Exotic, otherwise known as the Tiger King.
And the zoo is his kingdom.
Between taking care of all these animals and babysitting my employees, things can get a little crazy around here.
Joe's main source of income, which involved breeding, selling, and exhibiting tiger cubs, earned him an enemy with a checkered history all her own. The operator of a big cat sanctuary in Florida named Carole Baskin.
This dumb bee down in Florida.
Some bitch down in Florida.
He would just always call her names like that crazy bitch.
Carole Baskin.
Carole Baskin down there in Tampa, Florida.
She's a sick bitch.
Now, the feud between Joe Exotic and Carole Baskin has been brought to life in a hilarious, gritty, addictive new television series on Peacock called Joe versus Carole.
She wants to mess with me. I can mess with her. I got a message for Carole Baskin.
I thought it was hilarious.
It was fucking hilarious, wasn't it?
Playing Joe is actor John Cameron Mitchell, best known as the star of Hedwig and the Angry Inch, among many other iconic roles.
Hey, listen up, motherfuckers. I got a statement from Carole Baskin of Big Cat Rescue. She says, a fraudulent website has been created to sow distrust and alarm in the big cat community. To be clear, we would never hurt any animal, and we are deeply upset. Oh, fuck you, Carole Baskin.
I got to chat with John about his thoughts on Tiger King mania, what it was like filming this quintessentially American story in Australia, and how a pair of assless chaps may have just won him the role. Hey, John, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Can you tell us where you are right now? Where are you reaching us from?
I'm in New Orleans. I actually bought my first house here, and very excited to be working on it and fitting into this magical city, which is one of the few cities left with its soul intact in the U.S., I think.
Well, congratulations on the new house.
Thanks.
Let's start at the beginning. I just want to ask you, what initially drew you to this project?
You know, it just came through my agent, the audition, and it was kind of a last-minute thing, which made me think maybe they had lost somebody, but they won't tell me that yet. But I was very happy to take a look at it because, I mean, you don't get such a complex role, coming across your desk very often. And, you know, someone who is an anti-hero, meaning someone who has admirable qualities and less admirable qualities, which is really an actor's wonderland and playground. It felt like a kind of modern Richard III, you know, someone I could really sink my teeth into. And I hadn't auditioned for anything in about 25 years because I was just out of acting for a while and then kind of got pulled back in, but it was more like offers of people, oh, we'd love to have you. And I'm like, great. This seemed worth it. So I really went all out. You know, when I do something, I do it fully. And I was in London and, you know, got a mullet and makeup and costumes and my filmmaker friend to shoot me, you know, added my own bits and pieces to it to show what kind of improv I could do. And it was just so much fun, you know, and I think it went in on Monday and I got the job on Thursday.
Well, you're already something of a legend in the world of, you know, stage and screen. You Hedwig and Shrill and Girls, and you played Andy Warhol and Vinyl. You've played a lot of really incredible and iconic roles, but this role feels different to me than the ones you've played before. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the parts of your background and your experiences that helped you connect with this role.
Well, you know, it's funny because I started the docuseries and I couldn't really continue. The characters were compelling, but the treatment of it felt kind of rubberneck, looking at the freaks on the side of the road. It felt like a roadside drive-by kind of sensational thing, and it didn't have a lot of empathy for the characters, even though they were certainly compelling on their own. And when I read the script, or the first episodes, I realized this was taking a different tack. It wasn't hiding from the absurdity of an American folk tale, almost like a mythical feud, like the Hatfields and McCoys. It had a camp element, which certainly speaks to me, in my queer work. But the heart was there and the empathy was there, and you get to know these two characters, Carole and Joe, through their experiences of abuse and, received and given. The homophobia that defined his life. I grew up in the same area. He was born in Kansas. I was born in Texas. I lived in Kansas for 5 years. I lived in Oklahoma for a couple of years, not far from Wynnewood, where it takes place. Joe was one of the courageous ones that instead of running away to the big city, he was like, I'm going to make my stand where I'm from. The queer person's choices in these small homophobic towns are either, become the hairdresser and just kind of melt into the system and hide out, go away to New York, San Francisco, or make a stand and create community. And that's what Joe did, and eventually creating his safe space, his sanctuary, which was called the GW Zoo. And there was queer people, there was dropouts, there was ex-cons, there was rehab casualties. There were all the unwanted people, and I understand that. All of my theater training and film training, I create these communities of not necessarily unwanted people, but people who didn't always fit in. I really resonated to Eitan Frankel, our showrunner and head writer's a story of two misfits who in another world might have been friends, but became bitter enemies. And of course, there's not much of a difference between a commune and a cult. And in their case, they kind of became cult leaders in a way.
Yeah, and I was actually amazed to learn that you and Joe are just about the same age, even though you don't look it. Did you experience anything like what he experienced growing up gay in the South?
Yes, we're within 6 weeks of each other age-wise, so we have a lot of things in common culturally. The music we listened to, the movies we saw. I liked all kinds of music, and growing up in the military, funk and soul were big, but country was around too. And I loved, the country that he did too, and I even loved the songs that he didn't write or sing, but, made videos of. And when we were doing the shooting, Eitan was asking me what songs he thought I should use in certain scenes. There's a scene where I sing to my lover, and I chose a Vern Gosdin song, Do You Believe Me Now, which was a beautiful song from my youth. And for the wedding dance scene, I chose The Stroke by Billy Squier, which was a real nasty rocker type of song in the kind of Skinnerd riff department. There was a wonderful community feeling with Eitan, with the makers of this, that I could fold my own experience into. And I'm not doing an impersonation of Joe. I'm not doing the exact voice the whole time. I'm not doing every twitch that he does. I'm not doing a Saturday Night Live version. I'm doing an interpretation. And both Kate and I are, again, we're not doing some kind of charade. We're picking and choosing some elements physically and vocally, and then really letting our own emotion shine through, and and using the stuff we have, our humor, our empathy for the characters. We don't want them to be cartoons, but the characters themselves choose to become cartoons at times for their own purposes. So we don't shy away from that either. I believe something can be hilarious in 1 second, then 5 minutes later break your heart, and that's my wheelhouse. That's what I do with all my pieces. I try to do. And this felt very much a part of it. In some ways people would say this is a villain that I'm playing. I don't believe there are villains. I believe there are people who do terrible things and then sometimes do good things. So it's confounding. It's a human conundrum, that we have this kind of complexity to deal with. But it's catnip for an actor.
A word you used earlier is the word character. And that's something that, for me as a journalist who met all of these people and spent time with them, I heard that a lot. I mean, of course, in this context, it makes sense because you're making a narrative version of this. But I heard it a lot after Tiger King came out. People would interview me and they would ask, what do you think of these characters? And I'd say, these aren't characters. These are human beings. Travis is a human being. I sat with him for hours and hours in his living room, it's hanging out while he's smoking pot. This is a real guy. And so to hear that flattening of them was really disturbing. And to me, in the wake of Tiger King, people almost treated it like it was a reality show or something even more fictional than that. So I love to hear that you're trying to sort of re-infuse these people with their humanity.
Well, that's true. And, that's what I loved about your podcast, which came out before the Netflix thing. And it was deeper. It was still, you're not hiding from the sensational elements, which are right in your face. You can't hide from that. But I appreciate that you went into, his story about his husband and the heartbreaking story of how he died in the hospital parking lot, and the hospital would not take the body in because he was dead, and Joe had to sit with his body until his funeral home could come. God knows how many hours it was. And I even wrote a line, I don't think it ended up in the piece, in the series, but I said to Travis, when we're really unburdening ourselves to each other, I say, sometimes I feel like I'm still in that truck with him. I'm still sitting in there. And that he's very lonely. His gregarious nature makes you seem, he's got it all together and he's got a million people around him. But there's a desperation behind that nervous laugh. And that's what people really related to. That's why people, I think, gravitated to him more than Carole. Carole was very put together, and maybe people don't trust that. Maybe that's a certain amount of misogyny, the way that people hate Hillary because she seems controlled in public, but a woman has to sometimes be controlled or they're accused of being a hysterical woman. Joe, who worshiped masculinity, underneath it, you could see the insecurity, and people wanted to kind of hug him. And he wants to be hugged by the world. Sometimes it's, megalomaniacal, but he does.
What's so interesting about that with Joe as well is that he uses that vulnerability to manipulate people, right? He used it with me. He told me he was dying of bone marrow cancer. He would tell me all of these terrible, sad stories, and then I'd find out they were lies later. And I felt exactly that same thing. We connected about being gay. We connected about all these things. And then later, half of them eroded into lies, and I started to see the sort of the darkness that can underlie even that level of vulnerability. It's so complicated. It's an incredible psychology to try to inhabit.
It is, and it's catnip for someone like me. I was just reading an article about micro manipulations. The narcissist keeps turning it back towards themselves. And an exact example was like, I'm going to the doctor today, to switch sympathy to them. And then the person was like, why? And he's like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to burden you with that. And it's like, it seems just sad, but it's really a way of turning attention back to you. He's saying now that he has prostate cancer, and he's been moved to another facility. He's cried wolf so many times, it's hard to know what's going on.
I've seen his some indication that is real. In this case, he does have it. It's stage 1. It's fairly minor compared to what he's been saying. However, it is a real prostate cancer diagnosis, which is an odd thing, because at the time when he told me he had prostate cancer, I had many people telling me he was lying. And now that maybe he did, it's really hard to wrap your head around.
If it's that early, then it is theoretically curable. That's a kind of cancer that is curable. So I wish him well in that way. Like I said, he comes from a certain generation, especially of gay men, who worship masculinity. I always say that, it used to be in the personal ads and the grinders. And, back then it was hard to meet up with people who were gay apart from a bar. There were a couple national magazines that had personal ads. I remember reaching out in New York that way. And now it's, of course, Grindr, which is something that I will actually say that I invented. My film Short Bus, which came out before the iPhone, had a GPS dating app for gay men called Yenta, which was the matchmaker in Fiddler on the Roof. So it was a cuter name than Grindr. But he attracted the misfits. He attracted the people who didn't have their life together. And all of those people, you know, Travis and John, and I can't speak for the earlier boyfriends, one of whom is a horrible person in jail.
Yeah, JC.
Yeah, JC. I mean, no one talks about him because he was the worst. But he attracted these people, Dylan, you know, people who were drifting a bit. And his attentions, his humor, his goals, his irrepressible energy, you know, was a flame for the moths. But when masculinity becomes the currency, gays used to say, I'm straight acting, you know, as if it was better than someone who was feminine, a guy who was feminine, because our culture values that. A couple of pictures came out of me shooting, I think it was me kissing my husband in front of a pet shop through a paparazzi, the Daily Mail or something. Joe actually posted, Camera Mitchell's gonna make me look like a flaming fag, you know, when I'm just a hardworking gay male. And it was like, oh God, Joe, you know.
Well, one of the things I find so interesting about Joe is that and you just touched on it with his voice, is that his voice completely vacillates from moment to moment in terms of how he's modulating his masculinity and even his southernness. He's turning it up and he's turning it down. There's that one recording we have of him at Travis's funeral where he's just got the masculinity and the southern twang turned up to 11. And it's just unsettling because I didn't hear him talk that way, but he's talking to a group of bikers and to Travis's family. And so, you know, he's feeling insecure. I mean, I find the question of how you got into that voice really interesting. I mean, how did you get that voice down? Because it's like this protean thing.
Well, it does flow. And that, when people say the characters, you know, in your podcast, he did create a character and Carole created a character. And in today's world, where everyone's a little bit gay, when you're gay, you have to front, let's say. Either you have to try to pass as straight, or you got to tamp down the masculinity for some other reason, or tamp it up, or let go and be a big queen in the gay bar. Queer people know about acting very early. They know about metaphor very early, and they know about that things have a surface and they have a true nature. If you're in charge of the world, everything is what it is. People are literal when you have everything going for you. When you don't, you know there are layers. And that is what I relate to too. So he was an actor, a performer. And when I was trying to work on him vocally, I realized, oh my God, he's changing scene to scene, his accent, his placement of his voice. When he does his gubernatorial and the presidential speeches, he's a whole character. You know, he's talking all, you know, he's like a hardcore, you know, more Oklahoma guy. And he's, you know, he's butch and he's like, fuck all these people. And gay's a $3 bill and I'm broke as hell. He's playing a role of a Duck Dynasty guy who's purely individual, purely American. But when I essayed the voice, I heard, you know, his placement kind of up here. It was like, you know, it's a very strange kind of voice. But then when he was in close quarters with people, the voice kind of dropped back into his throat and the accent kind of faded. And, you know, he was from Kansas, which is a neutral kind of a state in terms of accent. I lived there. It's not Oklahoma, which moves into Texas. He lived in these different places so he could modulate his voice as needed. And I even noticed in very early videos in the 90s, he kind of has a lisp and he's much gentler and he's talking a little bit more kind of gay, got a sort of sweetness about him. So I took that one tape and modeled his early vocal mannerisms on that. He will be horrified when he sees, but that actually made me more attracted to him as a vulnerable human being, which he had to cover up. So I love all of that external acting stuff, you know.
Well, and one phrase I imagine you probably said more than any other, at least when you were practicing trying to get that voice down, is Carole Baskin.
I'll be honest, I didn't think I was going to survive the last few months. Only so much tragedy and pain one man can take. Not that Carole Baskin gave a shit about what I was going through. bitch keeps coming after me. May her tit get caught in her own meat grinder.
I mean, because you just nail it. Can you just break down for us what the secret is to saying Carole Baskin in that particular Joe twang?
Well, the A has to be a ba. It has to be a Baskin. And the S has to be a little bit of an SH. So Carole Baskin. Carole fucking Baskin. You know, it's just like, for some reason, all the S's become SH. And it's kind of up in the nasal area, you know, up in the sinuses. It can also drop, you know, when he's lost his performative thing. It's Carole fucking Baskin. And he does, you know, he smokes too, which we don't do much of in the show. But, you know, there's a kind of rasp at the bottom of the voice. So he can go lower than you expect as well. I'm not probably as big a guy. You know, I'm like a thinner boned guy. Ultimately, the emotions are what you relate to.
Well, I mean, in my experience, I don't know how he looks on film. In my experience around Joe, he's actually pretty slender guy. I mean, he was throwing up a lot. I don't know if he was doing that genuinely or if he was making himself throw up a lot. But he always was saying he couldn't keep down food, and he's not a guy of very large stature, but a lot of his photographs and I think he tries to, with his cutoff sleeve T-shirts and stuff, he tries to make himself look a little more, you know, muscly than he is.
Yeah.
Well, he's not a physically imposing guy, really.
No, and not really that tall, probably a bit taller than me. But, you know, all of our actors were really doing their version of the people, but also really trying to honor them. You know, we're not making cartoons of these people, even if some of their antics are cartoonish and absurd. We're not hiding from the fact that these people have a ridiculous side. I mean, we all do. But I really had more fun acting in this than I have in anything on camera, including Hedvig, because I was directing that and it was exhausting. This was a hoot. It was hard work. I was in almost every scene when I was shooting, but they really took care of me. We were in Australia, which meant very little COVID. Weather was great, no traffic up in Brisbane, lovely cruise. You know, I hate the class system on set, you know, where the actors are the royalty and the PAs are the, you know, grunts. And it's like, to me, it's my favorite compliment on set was from our wonderful camera operator. And at the end of it, he said, "John, I hate actors. I hate them, but I like you because you're one of us." I was like, that was my favorite compliment, because I want to be we're all punch card workers, you know. I like knowing that I'm coming in at a certain time, going out in another, and, you know, no bullshit, and let's just get on with it. No fancy treatment. But, you know, I did demand a 20-minute meditation because we were on what is called French hours, which means there's no break. You know, it's 10 hours of shooting plus travel and makeup. It was a wonderful, wonderful shoot. I loved my directors, Justin Tipping and Natalie Bailey, and my actors too. It was a wonderful time. I even wrote a Joe song, you know, as Joe and for Joe.
You can call me someone whose number you once used to know.
Singing to Travis. And Nat Wolff, who played Travis, sings on it too. He's a wonderful musician. You can look it up on my album. It's called Call Me Joe.
You knew from summer years ago. Oh, but darling, when you're calling, you can call me Joe.
One of the things I experienced working on this podcast is a kind of fatigue that would come over me, like exotic fatigue, you know, which is like the story is so intense and colorful, and every aspect of it is so intense and colorful. I used to call it fractal weirdness, where you would just zoom in and everything would get weirder. There was never like an end to it. That in the end of the day, after months and months, it was a bit like, you know those atomic fireballs, those candies we used to eat when we were kids. It's like at first you can't stop eating it, and then after a while you're like, okay, I need to step away from this and like drink a glass of milk. Like I can't engage with this anymore because it's so intense. Did you ever feel that working on this project? And you know, how did you combat that?
Yes. I mean, after a while, I could not watch or listen to Joe anymore. I mean, absorbing that for so long, especially when I was in quarantine in Sydney, just, for hours every day going through, listening and watching him. And after a while, you're like, I can't take him anymore. He's unbearable. Also wanting to see him caught unawares because he's so presentational and performative. I keep wanting to see what he's really like when he's quiet with his lover. And we had to imagine that stuff because there's no real footage of that. I want to know if he was a top or a bottom. I think he was a bottom, a very aggressive one. One of my favorite lines that was written, I'm yelling at Renke, an employee, and I'm like, God damn it, I got 2 guys at home fucking me up the ass. I don't need somebody else joining in. And, but I also wanted to know what it's like, when they're in bed together, what is where's the vulnerability? I kept looking for that. Have you seen the rough cuts?
Yeah, I've seen all of it. Yeah, I've seen all 8 episodes, yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts? I ain't seen it. I haven't seen it until it comes out.
Oh, really? I've seen it before you did. Wow, it's incredible. I thought you guys did an amazing job with really thorny, difficult material. I know how hard it is to make even just a cohesive narrative out of it. And then you guys invested it, like I said, with something else, which is life and emotion and these sort of undercurrents of politics, which is not easy to do. I want to ask you, it's clear from what you're saying that you did a lot of research for this role, a lot of research. And I'm wondering, is there anything in Joe's story that you knew about, but which wasn't written into the script that you incorporated into your performance?
Well, I did try to get that story about the death of his boyfriend in there. I'm not sure if it will end up in there. I did a lot of crazy improv as well. My audition actually had someone lent me some jeans that opened up in the rear with a zipper. So I actually believe I did an asshole shot for my audition. And I don't know if that would have been risky or if that clinched it, or I clenched it for Peacock. One of the things was interesting about, the 2 leads being queer, both Kate and I, who have become friends and, confidants, is that we wanted to queer it up a little more, if you know what I mean. Sadly, we only had 2 or 3 scenes together, but we had a blast. And an example was, the courtroom scene where I have a fantasy speech to the jury.
Every one of you were welcome at my zoo. Then, one day, a rich woman from Florida came down from her mountain to make my life a living hell.
He starts telling the story of his life, and, lights come up, and he's suddenly wearing a great outfit, and, he's taken the courtroom and made it into a kind of Broadway stage.
But there's one thing she don't realize. I am you.
I had a few other thoughts. I kind of wanted to do a kind of televangelist version where I run all over the courtroom and touch the juries and hold people and knock things over and jump up on stuff while saying, I am you. You're watching me because I'm you, or I'm what you want to be. And you don't want to be Carole Baskin. You want to be me, sadly, but for better or worse. And he's lying at times, for sure, and saying, I'm sorry I cut off that Carole Baskin head and put it in a jar. I was mad. You would be too. She took away your livelihood. They let me throw in my own taste, and put it more in words that I, that felt more kind of like a Jimmy Swaggart speech or something. And that kind of freedom an actor craves. That kind of freedom needs responsibility. You can't, just because you're doing it doesn't make it interesting. You know what I mean? Actors can't always see the big picture. Eitan really gave me a long leash.
One of the things you touched on earlier is the topic of Joe's husbands. I don't know if I've ever seen a character like this on television, which is a gay, polygamous character who's also kind of a serial monogamist.
You're my world, John.
And this park is your whole world. You work here, you live here, your friends are here. I just want you to be happy. You tell me what you want. You want a new truck, you want video games, whatever it is, you got it. Because nothing's more important to me than your happiness.
I mean, he's bouncing from relationship to relationship, and he's very needy, but he's also kind of scary and controlling. And a lot of the guys that he's dating are nominally straight, or at least have never been with a guy before, and a lot of them have never been with a guy since, or at least that's what they told me. How do you make sense of Joe's relationships?
If you grow up in those places, a lot of your crushes generally are with people who don't identify as gay. And regrettably, sometimes you sort of fall in love with your bully. There was always a sense, and you kind of would, in a small town, would try to get the sex you could. And sometimes it would be an older person, and it wouldn't always have, equal power. It wasn't always healthy, There was a lot of self-hate, so people didn't treat each other well if they hate themselves. But you can get a fetish for the dynamic of getting the straight guy. You're not supposed to. So when you connect to that so-called fetish, it's hard to let go of it. And in his case, he also seemed to have the dynamic of being the savior. Combined savior with get the straight guy is you find yourself attracted to these young, beautiful men who don't have a lot going on in their life. They connect to the daddy figure of Joe, who does know what's going on and will take care of them. It's the equivalent of a woman being kind of kept. At the same time, the dynamic wasn't going to last, either because they were more straight or because there was too much power on one side. So it was not a surprise that all of those relationships fizzled, including the Dylan one, which is, how do you continue a relationship when someone's in jail? I don't know how. The exception was, of course, his husband, for 17 years, Brian, who was truly, everyone says he was a great guy, and Joe's family loved him too.
Well, so as you probably know, in the wake of Tiger King, there's a fairly sizable Free Joe Exotic movement, which includes a legal effort to have his conviction overturned. I think he recently had a year shaved off his sentence, but when you've got 22 years in prison, that's not a whole lot. What do you make of the whole Free Joe Exotic movement?
Well, like I said, the documentary did stoke a sympathy for this anti-folk hero called Joe. And people love to free someone, and anti-authoritarian energies permeate American society on the right and the left. It's like, don't tell us what to do. Don't tread on me. And he was a very don't tread on me kind of guy. So, and, Carole probably did kill her husband, according to Joe, and a certain amount of misogyny there too, but Carole didn't hold herself, she's not a public person because she has this, like I said, a kind of closed off affect that some people are suspicious of. Combine that with sexism and you get, unsympathetic character. And if she was sent to jail for her husband, I don't know if there'd be a lot of free Caroles. I don't know. It's hard to say. Joe's story is very compelling, and his sense of victimhood is what a lot of people feel in their own lives, so they want to support that. And he's colorful, and whether they mean it or not, it's kind of a fun thing to say, Free Joe Exotic, he is America, don't take, People can turn away from their heroes very quickly in America too, So I don't know how sincere it is. For some it is. Some it's just publicity, and some of it is maybe they really do identify, I don't know.
So Joe is this person who you've, by this point, really plumbed the depths of. You've seen him for all his flaws, but you've also seen him for, his good attributes. And it seems like you've really made a sort of, psychic connection with this person. How does it make you feel when you think, given the totality of everything about Joe sitting in a cage for the next 20 years of his life?
It does make me sad. The only way you can possibly move on from that is to admit what you did. And there were recordings of him talking to two possible hit persons to do this. So it's hard, it's not very controvertible, this evidence. He surrounded himself with horrible people, especially these grifters, these straight guys mostly were supposed to be his saviors and then, in his view, turned on them. And certainly Jeff Lowe did. Everyone in that zoo was compromised morally in one way or but compromised by life.
Well, and something that we would be remiss not to mention is that, in addition to the 2 counts of murder for hire, I think it was 17 counts of animal abuse, animal trafficking, violating the Animal Welfare Act, the charges of that nature, which he was convicted on. And that makes up a lot of those 21 years that he's going to be serving in prison. I wonder, has this project opened your eyes at all to the magnitude of the problem of big cats in captivity in America?
Definitely. And I'm very happy that they chose to make all the cats CG generated in the series, to avoid any more discomfort for these cats. And I think is one way I agree with what Carole says, even if she doesn't exactly do it, but that most tigers are now in captivity in the world. And part of that is kind of a breeding situation that it's for money, and that's maybe not the best way to conserve and protect these animals. I think Joe was a little bit self-serving when he said, well, I'm here doing, science, and, like it's breeding these animals with each other is important to figure out their survival. It's like, I don't know, breeding a tiger and a lion together is going to lead to their, proliferation in the wild or even in the world. I think at the core, Joe really did connect with these animals, identified with them as trapped and unwanted the way he felt, but sadly also took advantage of that. In his mind, he was just, cub petting was to help all of the animals, to pay for it. But at the same time, he did have too many. And, I'm sure there were violations. Trafficking, some would say maybe that was just selling them and getting them to a better place. So that's I'm ambivalent about that stuff. It's very complex.
Yeah. Well, John, this has been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for making the time. And thanks for this incredible role.
You too, Robert. What a pleasure.
You can call someone whose number you once used to know. But darling, when you're up there, you can be
down. From Wondery, this is a special episode of Over My Dead Body, Joe vs. Carole. All episodes of Joe vs. Carole are available on Peacock, starting on March 3rd. Over My Dead Body, Joe vs. Carole is written and reported by me, Robert Moor. This episode is produced by Michelle Lands. Managing producer is Lata Pandya. Coordinating producer is Olivia Weber. Sound design by Jay Rothman. Executive producers are George Lavender, Marshall Louis, and Jen Sargent for Wondery.